Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. I am James and you are watching Blue Dog Reptiles. Now, I didn't put out a video yesterday and that's just because I didn't know what to put out. But we actually had a situation at my house. We have had a coon that has been getting in our coop and killing our chickens. And last night we ratified that situation, but it gave me an idea of some things that people just don't think about when they have setups. So when we build these big, extravagant setups, there are things that we overlook. Not because we're dumb or anything like that. It's just because it's minute things that we don't really think about until it affects us. And that is our enclosure escape proof? Or can something else get in? Now, we had the green keel belly lizard in here for a short bit. Now, we have the missing heads in this enclosure, and I went through, we made sure that no animal could get to the back or anything like that. But one thing I didn't even think about, I moved the mist head from right here to back here. And I was like, oh, that's a tiny hole, no big issue. Nope, that was just big enough. I mean, you can see, I can't even get my finger through it. Big enough for a keeled lizard to get through. Now, that's on a custom setup. Now, there are other things that we have to watch for too, like screened enclosures. Screened enclosures are big escape proofs. Obviously, most of the time when we have screened enclosures, we have chameleons or something that needs a lot of ventilation. But the problem with screen is it tears very, very easily. Now, we have holes for our foggers, but if you were to have a lizard or something like this, that in here, it could easily escape. But screen enclosures aside, it's not a big concern because like I said, most of the time you have a chameleon or something that is larger in those setups. But we do have issues with other enclosures. Vision enclosures. Now, I absolutely love vision enclosures. I love the way that they look, the way that they're set up. But one of the issues with, and I actually found this out very early on when I started getting visions, is the gap between the glass. So this gap is here to hold a lock, but this gap is big enough for baby snakes to get out. Down here we actually have frogs, and as you can see, I actually have paper stuffed in here because they can actually slip through the glass opening. Now, that's about the one downside to visions, and they have since fixed this with their new models, but that is about the only downside because everything else is screened off and sealed and all that. So that's the only complaint with vision. Now we move on to zoom heads, and let's see if I can pull out one that doesn't have an animal in it so I'm not disturbing it. Zoom heads do pretty good with how they have it set up in the back. There's not a whole lot of openings. I know when you get into the bigger 18 by 18 by 36, they have the tabs back here for your cords to come out, and if they break, then you do have an opening. Easy solution for that is to fill it with foam. Now, we also had a snake get out. This was back when I first opened and I didn't know any better. We had a baby snake get out when I first opened because I put these misting heads in, and we're still in the works to do this. I definitely will replace this screen, and we're gonna put the misting head actually drilled through the back so that there's no issues. But some of them have just enough play where you can see through it, and that's enough for a baby snake to get out. Now, another thing with a zoom head is the ventilation ports up front. Now, they are big enough for baby snakes to squeeze out. You shouldn't obviously have a baby snake in an enclosure this size, but it is definitely something to keep in mind. Now, unless you're dealing with like isopods or cleanup crews or like millipedes or centipedes, the gap on the side glass isn't really an issue, but you can use foam trim or what do they call door sealer, which is just a rubber gasket that'll sit in there and fill that void. Now, zoom heads can be kind of pricey and all that now, but they don't have the main issues. The main issues actually come from Exo Terras. Now, Exo Terras still have the same gap on the sides of the glass. They have actually bigger holes going through the ventilation on the front, but that's not even the real issue. The real issue is these holes right back here. Now these holes are used to pull cords through, or misters or whatever else, and they do have a slide here that keeps it closed, but if you have a snake in here or a baby gecko or a day gecko or whatever, it's not very hard for them to slide that over, for them to sneak through. And trust me, I have seen it done. Now, I am going to help you with how to solve these issues. Now, let's start with the Exo Terra here. Now, with this right here, there's a couple of different ways to fix this issue. You can either screen on the bottom of it, just use some hot glue to put a little screen patch underneath the bottom. Or if you're not using it at all, I've seen people put sticks back here behind the slider so that this can't move. And I've also seen people put foam in those holes to keep them from opening, or, well, to fill the void. Now, the front ventilation on the Exo Terra, typically what we do is we'll actually put screen, we can hot glue or super glue it to the back side of it on the inside of the enclosure. That way nothing can pass through. So those are some easy solutions for Exo Terras to fix all the voids to make sure that your animal can't get out. Obviously, as the enclosures get bigger, so do the ventilation, so do the holes. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, on divisions, a way to fix this issue, typically all we do, I mean, the glass sits nice and flush on the one side, but on the other side you have the gap between the actual vision enclosure and the glass itself. I typically, I mean, we put big snakes in here, so I'm not worried about them getting out. But if you do have a smaller animal, you can actually just use the rubber doorstop sealer and put it behind. That way you have a nice snug fit. And then with the door, you can do the same thing. You can put the double-sided tape, the thick stuff that most people use for like weather trim, and you can put that in between the setups. And that's it for visions. Visions are actually really easy to fix and take care of. Now, zoom heads, again, you would go through and just put vents or screen behind the vents in the back. On the top, there really isn't an issue. If you do have like fruit flies or whatever, I've seen a lot of people replace this top section with glass. Sorry, I was way zoomed in. And seal it up. That way the only part that opens is either the very back section or the front. But as far as holes, this one really doesn't have any issues unless you screw up like me and just stick a pair of scissors through to put a vent in because you're not thinking. But yeah, aside from the gaps, I mean, you're not going to, even with how small this gap is, it's about 1 millimeter, you're not going to have any snakes or frogs squeezing out through that hole. The only thing that you would really have coming out through the side of glass would be fruit flies. The vents down here, you could very easily just put screen. I typically go to like my big box stores and I'll get the pet safe screen for doors, and I just cut that up and I super glue it or hot glue it behind the vents there. This is also doing your research too, because depending on what species you have, you need to find out, okay, is it normal for it to climb? Is it normal? I mean, if you have a Pac-Man frog, obviously you don't need to screen up or protect the top of the enclosure because it's not going to be doing any climbing. But if you have a snake, then you might want to think about that. Now, once we do decide what to put in this enclosure here, I am going to foam up that little hole, and I will go through and do a thorough overlook of this tank. The nice thing, and this tank actually comes to us from Custom Aquariums, and it's really nice because you can see there's no gap, even with the lock here. There's no way for an animal to get out. So that was on me. That was not on Custom Aquarium. I just moved a misting head and didn't think about it. So now the last one that I want to talk about is actually an enclosure that people don't see too often, and that is actually Bioterium. Bioterium is actually a really nice enclosure. They do come in different sizes, but there are a couple of flaws with this. Now, they're really nice because they come in a flat box. They take 2 minutes to assemble. They would be perfect for any of your dry species or your small species. Now, if you do want to put something with humidity in here, these are just screwed together panels. So you will want to go through and silicone around the bottom and up the sides if you are wanting to have some kind of water or moisture in there. Now, the nice thing about this is actually out of all the enclosures, this actually has the nicest screen on the top. It's a nice, durable, very small hold screen. And so these work really, really nice. It can take a lot of abuse and not have any issues. Also, and we actually use some of these for our tarantulas. The other nice thing is you actually have to pull up for it to slide out. And then you actually have a feeding port right there. But as you can see, I mean, there's no holes for cords or anything like that. So if this is a setup that you'd be interested in, you would want to make sure to drill those for your holes and then secure them properly. But to each their own. But like I said, just make sure to do your research on what type of setup you're looking for. And I mean, they come in all different sizes and shapes, from Zilla's. Zilla is another one that has big ventilation up front. It actually does have holes in the back. But I just wanted to pass this along. I know it's not something that's talked about a lot when it comes to, we're so excited to get our animals, but sometimes we overlook the very simplest of things, and it's, well, could our animal get out? Or could something else get in? I actually have seen snakes come out of their enclosure to go into another enclosure just to eat the animal in the other enclosure. It does happen. It doesn't happen often, and we've seen it once in the store, and it was back when I was very, very, very beginner on this. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. What, you want to say something, Widget? No? No? You're just like, where's my food? As always, guys, love your family, but love your reptiles more.